Hi everyone, good evening. Welcome to this little live class on Twitch. My name's Hannah and I'm one of the coaches here. Let's Speak English in Santander. And I'm from Ireland, but I've been living and working here in Santander for a year and a half. And today I'm here to teach you some Inglés útil para el día a día. I'm going to teach you a really useful topic today. We're going to talk about affirmative, negative, and interrogative sentences. So let me write that in the chat first of all. Affirmative, negative, and interrogative sentences. Let's go. So that's what we're going to practice today. So first of all, when we're talking about these different types of sentences, different types of phrases, affirmative, negative, and interrogative, it's really important that you do it right. We need to be aware of changes in word order. We need to be aware of auxiliary verbs or modal verbs that might come into play when we're using these statements. So with be, anything that uses be, we don't need to put like an auxiliary verb because be itself can act as one. So what I mean is if you're saying something like estoy listo, you say I am or I'm ready, but no estoy listo, I'm not ready, or I'm not ready. So that's what you can do there. So be is kind of like a little exception. But with other ones in the present, if you're asking a question, do goes at the start. And if it's negative, we'll put don't in there. So that's really important. And then, of course, in the third person singular, does, doesn't, and then in the past, did or didn't. But I think it's best if I just start going with the translations and getting started to kind of put into practice what I'm trying to explain here. So let's get started. The first sentence I'm going to tell you, hay gente allí. So if you're watching and you would like to participate, just write your correct translation. Write your translation in the chat. Let's hope it's correct. If not, I'm going to correct you anyway. So, hay gente allí. A nice, simple, affirmative statement in the present. It should be a nice and easy one to translate. When we have I in Spanish, generally that's going to translate to there is or there are in English. So that verb haber, let's put it in the chat. Estoy a tope en el chat. Haber is normally there plus be. So haber, there, and be. So therefore, hay gente allí is there are people there, because allí is there. So remember, people is plural, so we have to say there are people there and not there is people, please. Really, it's like such a simple topic, such an easy thing, but so many people get it wrong. It's such a commonly made mistake for non-native speakers. So we're talking affirmative, negative, and interrogative statements. So it's starting off nice and easy anyway, so nothing to worry about. So then if we're saying no hay gente allí, the negative of that, entonces, it's going to be there aren't people there, or there aren't or there are not people there. But I like to use the contraction, of course, because if you don't use contractions, you're not going to sound natural and native, unless you, in a formal context, of course, at work or in a meeting, then you can get by without using contractions. But for any everyday general English, you need to master and have agility with the contractions. That's going to give you that extra toquecito nativo that you should be aiming for. And if you're not aiming for un toquecito nativo, if you're not trying to sound as native as possible, then what are you doing? You know that should always be your goal. So use the contractions. En fin. So there aren't people there. No hay gente allí. And that's it. So more with the verb be. So that was some with be in the present. So if we're talking about be in the past, for example, tú estabas con ellos. And I'm going to put that in the chat. Tú estabas I can't do the... Tú estabas con ellos, like a sentence, okay? Estabas con ellos. So that's in the past then. So remember, it's be. So with be, we don't need to say any did, don't, doesn't, because be is like its own special, it's a special verb, okay? So therefore, you were with them, and that's it. You were because I was, you were, he was, we were, they were. So you were with them. So then if it's a question with be, all we have to do is change the order. We don't have to, no tenemos que meter ningún auxiliar, ninguna palabra extra, solo hay que cambiar el orden. So, ¿estaba con ellos? Is simply, were you with them? We love the verb to be. It's such a slay because it's so easy. But yet, people still make mistakes with be. And I'm like, what are you doing? It's easy. So, were you with them? Okay. Is the question. Y tú no estabas con ellos. You weren't with them. So, with be, all you have to do is change the order. Okay. We put, were you with them? And that's it. So, we love the verb to be. It's so easy. And there's no problems there. So then we get on to present sentences with other verbs, with like the normal verbs, let's say. So let's take this sentence. I have a list of sentences here that I'm reading for this little live class. Tu hermano fuma. Tu hermano fuma. So that's just an affirmative sentence, okay? Affirmative, normal. Tu hermano fuma. Okay. So, third person, singular. Your brother smokes. Okay. Let's put it in the chat. Your brother smokes. That S at the end, so important in a third person singular sentence. Because if you don't pronounce right that S at the end, I can't tell you how bad it sounds. I'm sorry. It just really ruins any kind of professionalism or any kind of native touch that you have, because this is a kind of error that a native would never ever ever make. Okay, like maybe a native would make an error with irregular verbs actually in the present perfect, maybe, but a native would never say your brother smoke. No. Okay, so your brother smokes, okay? It's just like you wouldn't say, tu hermano fumas, tu hermano fuman. Like, you're gonna say, tu hermano fuma, and that's it, okay? So, super important to get that right. So then, when it's a question, tu hermano fuma, in that case, we have to think more about what to do, about how to form as a question. We're going to need to put in auxiliary verbs in that case. So we're going to start it with, does your brother smoke? Let's put it in the chat. Does your brother smoke? So we're going to start does, because it's third person and it's present. And then our subject, your brother, and then the verb. And because we have does, we don't need to add the S on to the verb when it's a question. You know what I mean? So only in an affirmative sentence do we have to put that S, do we have to conjugate the verb. In all other instances, we don't have to. So does your brother smoke? And that's the question. And then you can answer, no, mi hermano no fuma. So, no, my brother doesn't smoke. So the negative there, doesn't in the third person. And again, it's not, no, my brother doesn't smokes, because I've heard that a few times as well. After we have an auxiliary, that doesn't, that does, did, didn't, we don't have to conjugate the verb that comes after it. So no, my brother doesn't smoke. And that's it, nice and easy. Okay, so let's keep going with more of these affirmative, negative, and interrogative sentences, okay? So what about the past then? And let's have a look at this one. It's a little bit more complicated, but I think it's fairly easy. Ella no tardó mucho. Ella no tardó mucho. ¿Cuánto tardas? ¿Cuánto se tarda en hacer algo? Pues in inglés we have to formulate it a little bit differently. So, ella no tardó mucho. We would say, we have two options. It didn't take her long. Because when we say, like, cuando tardas en hacer algo, you're saying it takes you X amount of time to do something. So it didn't take her long, or it didn't take her a lot of time. But the important thing there is that didn't, because that marks a negative in the past. It didn't take her long. And because we have didn't, we don't have to conjugate the verb. So it's not it didn't took her long, sino it didn't take her long. That makes it nice and easy, okay? So it didn't take her long. Or she didn't take long. You can also say it like that. She didn't take long. I've got another one in the past, and this one's affirmative. And this one uses a really nice expression in English. So if you know it, try it. Llegaron sanos y salvos. Llegaron sanos y salvos. But what about that expression, sano y salvo? How do we say that? So first of all, llegaron, they arrived. Y fíjate en mi pronunciación, arrived, okay? It's not arrived, que he escuchado arrived un par de veces, y es como, ¿qué haces? Arrived, okay? Arrived. So they arrived, sanos y salvos. How do we say sano y salvo? Pues hay una canción bastante mítica con esta expresión, safe and sound, o safe and sound, digo, mi acento es un poco fuerte. Safe and sound. So, they arrived safe and sound. That's how we say it. Llegaron sanos y salvos. In the affirmative, it's like that. So how would you say that same sentence, but in the negative? In the negative, it would be, they didn't arrive safe and sound. They didn't arrive. And it's not they didn't arrived, because we have didn't, so we don't have to change the verb. They didn't arrive safe and sound. And what about the question form? Llegaron sanos y salvos? How do we start it as a question? Did they arrive safe and sound? Did they arrive safe and sound? And that's it. So, because we have did, we didn't change it. Did they arrive safe and sound? Okay, they didn't arrive safe and sound. So what about when we're talking in the present perfect and we're talking about affirmative, negatives, interrogatives in the present perfect? It gets a little bit different then. We don't use the auxiliary didn't or doesn't or did or does, but rather we use our part of the present perfect, that have or has, and that can act as the question and the negative part of the sentence. So, for example, he visto 3 películas esta semana. He visto 3 películas esta semana. And because I've said esta semana, this week, que esta semana no ha terminado. Por eso en inglés vamos a usar el present perfect, because the present perfect is those actions that have not finished yet. They're still going. This week is not over. It's still going. So, he visto 3 películas esta semana. In English, we're going to say, I have seen. And remember, visto, like in Spanish, it's irregular. See, seen in the present perfect. So, I have seen 3 movies this week. Let's put it in the chat. The reason it's present perfect is because it says this week. If I said, vi 3 películas ayer, then we would use the simple past, because ayer, yesterday, is done. So I saw 3 movies yesterday, but I have seen 3 movies this week. Hopefully the difference is clear, for that one. Some people make a lot of mistakes with the difference between the simple past and the present perfect, but it's not that difficult really. You just have to think, is it an action that's still continuing or is it done? So the simple past will require anything like yesterday, last week, because it's done. You can say this morning, cuando ya es por la tarde, porque la mañana se acabó. Last year, the other day, an hour ago, anything like that. But things that will cause the present perfect is things like this year, this month, this week, recently, últimamente, lately, already, yet as well. So anyway, that he visto 3 películas esta semana. So then, what is the negative of that? Okay, no he visto 3 películas esta semana. I haven't. Okay? How do we say that in the negative? No he visto 3 películas. Well, in the negative, in the present perfect, we use that have. So we don't say I don't have seen. Es que el otro día en clase alguien me ha dicho o alguien me dijo I don't have seen. Y yo, cuidado, be careful please. We just say I haven't seen. I haven't seen 3 movies this week. And that's all you do. It's super, super simple. So I haven't seen 3 movies this week. And then what about the present perfect when it's a question? Actually, it's very simple and it's just like when with be, all you have to do is change that order. So, ¿has visto 3 películas esta semana? As a question, you don't have to say, do you have seen? Es que alguien me ha dicho esto también alguna vez. Did you have seen? Y yo, no. Así no se dice. Have you seen? Is how we ask that question. Have you seen? Okay, so I have seen, I haven't seen, have you seen? So the way to really have agility with these different topics is by repetitions. And that's something that we focus on a lot in our classes online, in our online academy, the gym. So I really recommend that you click on the link que he fijado en el chat y voy a mandar el enlace otra vez. Si tienes que ponerte las pilas con el inglés este año, pues te recomiendo nuestra academia online, el gym, porque nos centramos mucho en las repeticiones, correcciones, feedback en tiempo real. Tienes dos profesores nativos con acentos diferentes y pues las clases son muy participativas, muy amenas y if you need to make a difference with your English this year, if you need to, fix your mistakes, improve your pronunciation, increase your vocabulary, then our online academy is perfect for you. Tenemos clases de lunes a viernes, todos los días. Tenemos clases de A1, A2, a B2, C1. Entonces, hay clases para todos. So, make sure you check out the link that I've sent in the chat if you want more information about our online academy, the gym. So we're going to keep going with a little bit of affirmative, negative, and interrogative sentences, forming those different sentences in English. So it's really easy, but it's one of those things that a lot of non-natives mess up. And the main thing that I see, the main mistake that I see is, for example, they conjugate the verb after we've used an auxiliary. So, for example, voy a decir una frase más completa. Fui al parque, pero no fui a la tienda. Fui al parque, pero no fui a la tienda. So, how do you say that in English? Fui al parque, pero no fui a la tienda. Pues, aquí surge el problema. El problema que más escucho, o el error que más escucho. And that is el I didn't went. I didn't went. Y eso es un error que un nativo, pues, a native would never, ever, ever in a million years make that mistake, okay? So that's something you have to control and you tienes que dominar esto con la agilidad, la precisión, con esto, con los verbos auxiliares y como cuando tienes un auxiliar, pues no conjugas el verbo, pues fui al parque, pero no fui a la tienda. So, fui al parque, I went to the park. claro, because go in the past, fui, claro, really easy. Pero no fui a la tienda. Is it I didn't went to the shop? Por favor, no. I didn't go, okay? I didn't go. Y igual el I didn't go or I didn't went o también con la pregunta, ¿fuiste? Y me dicen, did you went? Y yo, no. Did you go? ¿Por qué? I'm like a broken record. I'm saying it again and again. Cuando tienes el auxiliar, no hay que cambiar el verbo después del auxiliar, porque el auxiliar ya está en pasado. Y el auxiliar marca cuando es negativo o cuando es una pregunta y ya. So, I went to the park, but I didn't go to the shop. And it's that easy. And that applies to all those verbs when you're talking in the negative, in the past, in the interrogative. We don't need to change it in that case. So, for example, let's do another one. In the present this time. No llueve mucho aquí. No llueve mucho aquí. Well, no, it's not true, porque vivo en Cantabria, pero bueno. In English, so this one, remember when we talk about the weather, we have to use a subject pronoun. We have to say it. We want to start that off with it. So, it doesn't rain much here. So because it's third person singular, it doesn't, not it don't. And es que he escuchado, it doesn't raining much here. But raining is like lloviendo. O sea, no está lloviendo, it's not raining. But that's like right now. Pero yo he dicho, no llueve mucho aquí. En plan, en general, normalmente. So it doesn't rain much here. Okay. And it's not it doesn't rains. Porque tenemos ahí el doesn't. Así que it doesn't rain. Okay. What about this one? No ocurrirá. In the future, what do we do in the future in terms of auxiliary verbs, in the present, or in the affirmative, the negative? No ocurrirá. We don't have to add an auxiliary verb because we've got our will or our won't, and that acts as our modal. So, no ocurrirá, it won't happen. And I always like to use a contraction. I will never say it will not happen because it just sounds too formal, okay? Maybe in a meeting, in an email, in writing, you can avoid contractions, but in everyday conversation, you have to use your contractions. No ocurrirá, it won't happen. And then if that were affirmative, how would we say it in the affirmative? It will happen. It will happen. And I like to contract will even more. It'll happen. So that's how most natives will use the future tense in English. We'll contract it with the subject or with the pronouns. It'll happen. And notice how quickly I say it. It'll happen. It'll happen. That's a very tricky one to reproduce if you're not native. But be aware of it, know to understand it. And if you can do it, well, even better. It'll happen. And then in the interrogative, how would we ask a question? Ocurrirá? How do we ask that as a question? Well, in the future with will, asking questions is very easy. It's just like in the present perfect or when we're using the be verb. We just have to change the order. So, will it happen? Let's put it in the chat. It'll happen. It won't happen. So it's super easy. Here's another one with be, okay? And we're talking about question in the future. Another one in the future. ¿Cuándo estarán aquí? ¿Cuándo estarán aquí? How would we say that in English? If you're watching and you want to participate with me, you please write your answers in the chat, your translations in the chat, but I'll say them anyway. So, ¿Cuándo estarán aquí? How do we say that in English? When is cuando, and then it's a question. So first we're going to put will, then our subject, they, then our verb, be, aquí, here. When will they be here? When will they be here? And how I would say it, when will they be here? So again, I almost contract when and will. I'm not sure if it's even exists in writing, this word. It's like when'll they be here? Like that. When'll they be here? That's what I would say in a normal, everyday spoken conversation. Super like that. When'll they be here? When are they going to get here? Something like that. Super fast. So then what about that one in the past? ¿Cuándo estuvieron aquí? ¿Cuándo estuvieron aquí? In the question form, in the past, ¿cuándo? When, as always. And then be. So remember, it's a question. We just changed that order from when it's affirmative and it's in the past. So were. When were they here? When were they here? They were here an hour ago. For example, an answer I made up. They were here. So look at the difference. When were they is the question, and then answering they were here. Estuvieron aquí 1 hour ago. And then present perfect. Let's do another present perfect practice, okay? ¿Cuántas veces han estado aquí? ¿Cuántas veces han estado aquí? How do we say that in English? So first of all, ¿cuántas veces? How many times? How many times? Han estado aquí. So this requires the present perfect because we're not talking about a specific moment in the past. It's like at any moment in the past until right now. ¿Cuántas veces han estado aquí? So for that reason, we're going to use the present perfect. So how many times? Then it's a question. So we're going to start with have, subject they, verb been, here. How many times have they been here? Let's put it in the chat. How many times have they been here? And that's it. How many times have they been here? And that's how you form that one. Again, it's really easy. It's nice and simple. It just requires practice and repetition to get the real agility on it. Okay? You know, to get so precise, confident, ágil con el tema, pues hay que repetir un montón de veces. Loads and loads and loads and loads of times. Let's keep going with our little practice on auxiliary verbs, negative, affirmative, interrogative statements. That's what we're practicing today to get you some more agility and precision and accuracy with the topic. So, what about this one? A question in the past. I always find that the questions in the past tense are the most commonly made mistakes in English by non-natives. What about this? ¿Le viste ayer? How are we going to start that one off? It's a normal, simple past sentence. We're going to start it with our little special word of the question in the simple past. Did. Okay, so did you see him yesterday? And we use the simple past because yesterday is done. It's over. It's not still going on. Ayer is done. Did you see him yesterday? It's not did you saw him? Did you seen him? Did you sees him? Do you see him? I've heard it all in class. The right answer, did you see him yesterday? Y punto. But what about this? ¿Le has visto hoy? So, what tense are we going to use? What tiempo verbal are we going to use for that question? Hoy, today. Is today finished? Or has today finished? No. In that case, it's still continuing, it's still ongoing. Therefore, present perfect. Have you seen him today? Have you seen him today? And that's how we ask that one. So it's not, do you have seen him today? It's just, have you seen him today? Y creo que lo del present perfect es un poco lioso porque, pues, el have you en el present perfect no tiene que ver con tener, have de tener. Entonces, si vas a preguntarle a alguien si tiene algo, pues no puedes decir have you en ese caso. Por ejemplo, ¿tienes coche? Por ejemplo, no es have you a car, es do you have a car, ¿ok? Todavía con lo de tener y have, cuando estás hablando de cuando tienes algo, cuando posees algo, pues entonces es do you have, did you have, bla, bla, bla. Sin embargo, si dices, no sé, has tenido un coche, pues así puedes decir have you had a car, porque el have you ahí funciona como marcar el present perfect, como el has tenido, ¿ok? So, es algo bastante lioso porque siempre escucho a mis alumnos y ellos dicen algo así, en plan, have you this? Y luego cuando hay que hablar en present perfect, pues dicen, do you have had? Y yo, no. Have you had? Do you have in present? So it's just a little note that I think is worth making. Okay. Back to those sentences, the normal sentences that we're doing. So we've done, ¿le viste ayer? Did you see him yesterday? ¿Le has visto hoy? Have you seen him today? Okay. Y now, ahora, ¿le verás mañana? ¿Le verás mañana? Future. Okay, this one is using the future with will. Okay. How do we say that in English? So, future, there's no other extra auxiliary verb. We're going to start it with our modal that marks the future. That is our will. Okay. We've got our answer from Jose. Will you see him tomorrow? Well done, Jose. Thank you. Perfect. So it's nice and easy, right? Will you see him tomorrow? Perfect. Now, le verías si tuvieras tiempo. So this one, a little bit trickier. We're going to use the second conditional. Le verías si tuvieras tiempo? How would we say that? So when we're talking in the conditional, we don't want to use will unless it's the first conditional, but this is the second conditional. So in that case, we want to say would. And when it's a question with the conditional, we'll start the sentence with would. And listen to my pronunciation of would. It's one that's a little bit tricky for Spanish speakers. Would. Okay? A lot of my students, or a lot of people I've heard, they say good. Yo no. So if you can say huevo, egg, huevo, pues ese sonido, huevo, would. You can do it. Hay que practicar. Es como, practica primero diciendo en plan, tienes que practicar y hacer sonidos muy raros. But anyway, so, le verías si tuvieras tiempo. In English, would you see him if you had time? Would you see him if you had time? So the second conditional in English is would, and then the rest of the sentence. And then in the clause, if you had, if plus the verb in the simple past. So, le verías, would you see him? Si tuvieras, if you had tiempo, time. It's nice and easy. Okay. And then, what about the future with going to? ¿Le vas a ver más tarde? ¿Le vas a ver más tarde? It's a future with going to. So we form going to with some form of the verb be plus going to. So be in the present plus going to. So how do we ask questions with be? We start with conjugated form. And then because it's you are. So in a question, are you going to see him later? Let's put it in the chat. Are you going to see him later? Are you going to see him later? And listen to how I would say it. Are you going to see him later? Es que yo nunca digo, are you going to see? Es que nunca. Siempre estoy con el gonna. Are you going to see him? And listen to how quickly I say it. Are you going to see him later? It's like it all disappears into one sound. Y por eso siempre me dicen que no entienden los nativos. Pues I feel your pain. So, are you going to see him later? That's how we say that one. What about this? Tienes que verle. Tienes que verle. Tener que. To have to. So, tienes que verle. Do you have to see him? Do you have to see him? No tengo que verle. I don't have to see him. Let's put it in the chat. Do you have to see him? I don't have to see him. Okay. And that's how we form those ones. So, those are some useful sentences to practice your agilidad en inglés, tu precisión, con los verbos en su forma interrogativa, afirmativa, negativa. Y pues como lo he dicho, es importante practicar, repetir frases así, mejor con un profesor, una profesora como yo, en clase y recibir correcciones y así mejorarás y así aprenderás. Y pues nada, os dejo. Muchas gracias por ver esta clase en directo. Espero que hayáis aprendido algo. Y pues no olvidéis que hay el enlace aquí en el chat si quieres aprender más inglés útil para el día a día en clase con unos profesores increíbles aquí en Let's Speak English. Pues ahí tienes el enlace con toda la información. Así que nada, gracias por ver y nos vemos en clase. Chao.